So I think that's what's going on in this verse. Whichever way they're trying to make the argument, however, might be harder to decide than they're representing.
You could actually bring in the Greek world here too, because Hermes is an angelos of Zeus. So is Iris and other messengers of the Olympians.
There's a symbol they use, which is the circle. It has
That
a
means
very
remission.
right. Yes, but also it says immediately after it's Sinaiticus star asterisk. So that would mean
That's a corrector.
yeah.
Dr. Richard Carrier, we've got another question from someone who supports MythVision. Thank you so much, my friend. Colossians 2:18 has two variants that seem to have opposite meanings. One which supports visions as authoritative and one that repudiates it. Do you have any insights on the author's original intentions?
Do you have an Allen text?
Yes, I do.
Could we grab it? I want to see what they're
Okay, I'll go get it.
Awesome. So while you go and grab that.
I have not looked into this before.
So this is definitely new news.
Yeah. It's worth pointing out that I don't often work with Colossians because I classify it as a forgery, and so it's not, and also post-war, so it's not.
But it is interesting that there's a negative and a positive in this vein.
Oh, interesting. The Mormons have particular theories about it too.
Yeah, that is interesting because you have that variant with Ha'uk.
Yeah, I know. So there's both the May and the Ha'uk.
Mm-hmm.
Curious what's in the interlinear.
Oh yeah, that's right, Hameh and Ha'uk.
Okay, let me see that again. So fascinating. All right. So they're saying the verse starts with the negation.
Yeah, the Hameh, right?
Yeah. Well, they're not saying what. So it's not clear here if it's a double negative or not.
That's right, and also what is the relationship to the primary verb?
Right. Yeah. This is a good example where Swanson would be very helpful, because he'd actually show you the sentence structure of the different readings. Well, so I'm not really sure how to answer this because by the variant readings, as I understand it, it would create a double negative. And there's a problem with double negatives in Greek is that sometimes they don't mean double negatives.
Sometimes they're intensive and sometimes
Right.
they negate each other.
So this would require more looking into for me to answer.
But there are other words that are somewhat ambiguous in that verse. The humiliation or the worship or the embarrassment and so on.
Yeah, and it's also like for just the main without the variant readings that no one let no one disqualify is already a double negative, right? Because disqualify is a negation. So so if you add another negative in there, I don't even know what I would do with the sentence. Yeah.
Yeah, even the translation of
like
it is
you said,
tricky.
delighting in humility and the worship of angels, which sounds like two opposite things.
Yeah.
So what is he saying? Is he saying people are humbly claiming to have revelations from angels? Yeah, I don't know how to answer this question. I would have to do some work on it. That would be a project I would need to be hired to do because I'm not sufficiently interested in resolving it to sit down and spend like the hour it would take to like look at the literature and see what the commentaries say. That would be the first place I would go, right? Is I would go to like the Hermeneia commentary on Colossians and then see that will definitely have a section on this as to what do we do with these variants, what would they signify, and then I would see if that opinion resonates with the evidence that I'm looking at, and then I would just report my findings. That's what I would normally do with a thing like this. Trying to figure it out myself would take a lot more work.
But I think the brilliance of the question is the problematizing of the worship of angels.
Yeah.
And whether that is a trustworthy thing to do or whether it's problematic. And depending on how one deals with these double negatives and the textual variants, you would see that it's possible, and this is what your viewer had recognized, is that the attitude toward the worship of angels was contested. And that's a really good observation.
No wonder Mormonism is in this. They got a lot to lose, right?
Yeah.
So we've got Moroni, we've got things happening.
I bet that's one that may be informing the question, but it's a sophisticated question, but it's a difficult text.
Yeah, it is, right. That's just what he said. Yeah, it's the variants are odd, and so it would be and because the sentence is already convoluted, and to have that to throw another negative in there, especially because those are two different things. So the ha'uk is different than the ha'meh. There's slight subtle differences in meaning there, and so like that would be a project. And then where did that come from? So like how did ha'meh become ha'uk? That's one question. And then like which came first? And then like I think the ha'uk it said it was in P46, which is pretty old, right? And so then who dropped it if it was cut? So there's a whole galaxy of research here. You could probably do a dissertation on.
Well, and this issue about whether angels are trustworthy, the law is given by angels, so that means that they're not perfectly given by God, because the angels are going to distort them.
That's the point. That's MacDonalds of messengers. They speak for God supposedly,
Yeah.
and then maybe some of them don't, and so
That's exactly right. And so, are angels trustworthy or not?
And also having plural angels too, because one of the main views was the main agent of God's voice is the Metatron, right? This one, and sometimes the Metatron is associated with Michael, sometimes it's associated with other angels, but there's this idea that there was one angel whose job it was to speak for God, and the leading theory that you would normally find in the descriptions and stuff is that he operates like an instrument. God like puppets his mouth and makes the angels say what God says, which on that model he couldn't say the wrong thing. But then you have a lot of references to angels, confusing people or saying the wrong thing. Angels you can't trust. But then there's a very different thing between like trusting what an angel says and worshiping the angel. So these are two different things going on in that verse. And so what is actually the thing being criticized? Is it the worship based on things that people claim to have seen? And even then, like the person asked whether this passage supports the general idea that visions are reliable or not. I don't think that's the question that would arise here, because they're talking about trusting specific kinds of visions. So I don't think there would be any criticism here of visions in general. I think it's similar to like what you find in like the James literature and stuff like that. This idea that you have to test the spirits because some spirits are lying spirits, right? So, but that also corollary means that some of them are not lying spirits. So you do, these are real spirits. They're really talking. So the general theory is yeah, this is a real angel appearing to you. But the question is it a deceiving angel or is it a proper angel from God? That's the debate that's going on in this verse, right? So it's not what's in contention is not a general theory of revelation. What is in contention is how did you test them? How do you trust them? Why should you trust? Just because they say they're an angel doesn't mean they're actually from God or that they're actually accurate or reliable. If that's what's being said here. So it's a different thing being in contention. So I think the person who's asking the question, I think they wanted it to be more consequential. I think it's less consequential, the debate as to what's being said in this verse. It's more about, are you testing the spirits? Or why should you shouldn't just trust spirits willy-nilly, and angels among them. So I think that's what's going on in this verse. Whichever way they're trying to make the argument, however, might be harder to decide than they're representing.
You could actually bring in the Greek world here too, because Hermes is an angelos of Zeus. So is Iris and other messengers of the Olympians. But they don't always give trustworthy messages because Zeus is giving deceptive messages. But nonetheless, Hermes gets worshipped. Right, he's the angelus who's
sending a deceiving
That's
spirit.
what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Yahweh does it too.
Right.
So how do you trust? This is the craziest thing right here. By the way, if we wrapped our minds in that worldview, assuming this is true, right, ontologically.
What edition is this?
If we did that, like at the end of the day, if we were honest, taking a critical approach that we do, how would we know if God is lying through these messengers or if he's telling the truth? Like, how could he, like, it's ridiculous to think he would really blame us after purposely tricking us. But then James is trying to argue against that, right? Isn't he saying something like God does not lie, there's not shade or shadow? But Hebrew Bible indicates this idea that, you know...
I want to get into the Greek technology of revelation. For the Greeks, a dream that comes in your sleep can be revelatory, but the problem is it's verbal, but it's not demonstrable to your best senses and to your cognition. A portent is visible, and you know that something amazing has happened, such bird flight, for example, or the amazing appearance of a serpent, or whatever, or earthquake. But the portent doesn't have any verbal interpretation of it. So you have this pattern of having dreams that are followed by a portent, or a portent that then has a dream attached to it. So you have the conscious recognition that the gods are trying to speak to you, but you also have what the God is saying because you have a portent. And then the same thing is true of having a prophet who is able to, like Calchas in Homer, who can. The ancients were very conscious of what are the technologies by which the gods communicate to human beings. And they can be dreams, they can be prophets, they can be portents, and portents of various kinds. And of course, what do you do with a bird portent? Birds are flying around you all the time. How do you know, what the meaning of a bird is? Because it's a portent. So you need a prophet to tell you, well, here's what's going on with the birds. But this is why you have in the Acts of the Apostles, Cornelius's dream, but it's actually it's not a dream. It's a revelation while he's awake, and you have this portent of the descending. So scholars have seen these things before, but most readers of the New Testament are not going to be aware of these technologies of revelation that are in Judaism too.
Wow. Anything you're finding over there?
Well, this edition doesn't have the grades, the scores. So my edition of Allen, they grade each variant decision to A to D.
No, this is Nestle. This is not allowed.
Oh, this is Nestle. That's why. Okay. Oh, I see. I wanted the Allens, right? Okay.
No, I don't have the Allen.
That's a shame. This is also Allen participated in the construction.
That's right. Yeah.
But I wanted to see what the confidence was, but the committee that.
Yeah, I like to
it.
hear that too, because that's something Stephen Nelson brought up to my attention, my friend who's into the Greek. And I have to harp on this. Those guys that I talked to, the Israel-only guys, they jump to places like John 7:35, I think it is, where it talks about where will he go among the diaspora to teach the Greeks. And it's just super ambiguous. The sources are not graded high at all. They're really, it's like not even sure. Sorry, go ahead.
So hold on. Okay, now I do need to look at that again. So there's a symbol they use, which is the circle.
That means omission.
Right. Yes, but also it says immediately after it's Sinaiticus stars, asterisk. So that would mean
That's a corrector.
yeah.
Here we go.
So is it meaning? I would like to see. Actually, I could do that. I could actually go see. Okay, so no, I was misreading this. It is not a double negative. There are
Because it's not in the same phrase.
It's the different version of the negative. So hame,
That's right.
Either hames or hame, which is an error I could totally explain happening. It means the same thing, and
But the negative is in the verb kata kat, whatever it is.
correct. Right, the double negative there is is in the sentence no matter what you do. So really, what we're looking at here is there's only one place. If what they're saying here is correct, there's only one place that the negative is omitted, the first negative. Which would be some corrector Sinaiticus, that's really strange. But so I'm going to try and see if I can bring out Sinaiticus itself.
We're deep in the woods here.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
I love this. Hey, we can't leave this
Deep
show.
in the weeds.
We can't leave this show until we're out of the woods. So I just wanted to bring up to you, Dennis.
This would
what
be
he does
so
right.
easy if I had a Swanson. I just pull my Swanson. It would have the exact line from Sinaiticus, and it would have the reference describing what hands are did deviations on it and so on.
We
so
tried.
yes, so yes. The question is whether that negative is whether it starts with the do not or let us not. So yeah, but anyway, the other context is that what's in contention is whether they're arguing against a specific type of revelation trusting, not all revelation trusting. If that might be relevant to what your person's asking about.
It's interesting. I just think people, and this is a great example of like getting into this, but when you talk about the gradation, I mentioned, and you were deep in dive, John 7:35, where it talks about where will he go? Will he go among the diaspora to teach the Greek people, or Greeks, as the translations often put it? But when I looked into this with Stephen Nelson, because Stephen Nelson's the one who knows how to search this stuff,
Sure,
he
yeah.
has knows the gradations and how scholars go. You know, I asked this of Dr. Jason Staples, who's also PhD.
That's right.
You
Yeah.
know, he's a professor at Chapel Hill, also a football coach, all that stuff. But he looks at this and I said, "What do you think's going on here?" He says, "I think it's purposely ambiguous," he said. Like, and the scholars who are looking at this grading it are giving it like a C or a D, right?
Bad
So it's
grade,
like,
yeah.
there is no reason
They're not
to
confident.
make that your cornerstone of your doctrine. You should really put that to the side and not say, he's teaching Greeks, which means he's teaching Greek Israelites, because that's their thesis,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
No, put that to
Interesting.
the side. Stop trying to be confident in this weird John 7:35 ambiguous passage, because for all you know, by the time John's written, these are real Greeks according to their own thesis post 70. So
Yeah.
anyway, it's an interesting thing. Thank you for taking the time, and maybe we get into that later.
Yeah. Someone could hire me to go into it in more detail, and I would go through the library, check the commentaries, and then write up what's going on here, what scholars think's going on in here, and what I think, based on reviewing what scholars have said. So,
Well, thank you so much for the question.
Verse 19 has to be considered too, by the way.
Ladies and gentlemen, join MythVision's Patreon not only to support us, but there are 72 videos that I did with Dr. Dennis R. MacDonald and Richard Carrier, all on the Patreon, early access. You guys can ask personal questions when I go to interview these scholars, and you're helping MythVision grow.